All right. Baruch Hashem. Here we go. We're starting a new parak tonight. This is parak Tolan. Parak Tolan begins on the bottom of Kuf Lamed Zayin, Amud Beis, and we will be learning Daf Kuf Lamed Ches toward the bottom, just 3 lines from the bottom of Kuf Lamed Ches Amud Beis. And we're totally shifting gears. We've been learning Kol Inyanei Mila, and now we're going to be learning about a mix of issues about building an ohel on Shabbos, about wearing a hat on Shabbos with the intention of it being an ohel. Is that mutter? Let's say you want to go outside and wear a baseball hat. So there's a havamin in the Gemara that might be usher if the brim of the hat is more than a tefach. That's a possibility. Machlokes poskim. But you'll see the text in the Gemara. We'll speak about some issues of borer as well. Instead of theorizing, let's jump right in. New Mishnah Kuf Lamed Zayin, Amud Beis at the new parak. Rabbi Eliezer Omer told us one is allowed to hang up this netting that functions as a sieve, as a colander on Yontif. In other words, it's okay to make this type of ohel, even though it's not really being made for an ohel, but in its building and its function, it does kind of work like an ohel. Not only that, you can also put stuff inside of it to be filtered on Shabbos. So we have to figure out, why is it mutter for the ohel aspect, and why is it mutter for the borer and possibly meraket aspects, as we'll see later today in the Gemara as well. So that's the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer. So you're not allowed to make that netting, to hang it up that way. That would be a problem of a CS ohel, of making an ohel. Just so we have some context, the issue of making an ohel, of making a tent on Shabbos, when it's done in a deoraisa fashion, according to some Rishonim, it's a tolda of the issue of boneh. So we just have to have some context. Ohel is not always derabbanan. Maybe opening an umbrella might be a din derabbanan. Maybe the case that I painted earlier, which is when you're putting on a hat with a large brim, maybe that's also derabbanan. All that's possible. But we have to recognize that boneh itself, that the concept of ohel itself may be a part of the world of boneh. So the Rabbi Eliezer was lenient on both fronts, on building out the netting, and as well to put food inside. And the Chachamim said, "Ein tolen, you're not allowed on Yontif. Ein nosnen l'tzuliya b'Shabbos, and on Shabbos you're not allowed to put anything about aval nosnen l'tzuliya b'Shabbos, but you are allowed to put stuff into the netting on Shabbos." Let's see how the Gemara understands this. First and foremost, we have to understand the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer was quite lenient here. So says the Gemara, "Hashta Rabbi Eliezer osufe ohel arai lo mosifinon." We know from another place, and we'll see this Marimakom soon, that Rabbi Eliezer does not allow to extend an already existing ohel. That he does not allow. Yet here, here in our Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer says, no problem. First words of the parak, Rabbi Eliezer Omer Tolan Samishmeres B'Yom Tov. We have another Marimakom where Rabbi Eliezer doesn't even allow the hosafa for an ohel arai, just to add for an ohel. Yet in our Mishnah, he seems to be matir. Maihi, says the Gemara, about 10 lines from the bottom. What does it mean? What is the Marimakom where we see that Rabbi Eliezer didn't allow a hosafa of an ohel harai? So answers the Gemara with a Mishnah that we learned earlier in the parak. T'Tanan, the Mishnah writes, we learned about this type of like awning or some type of a shutter that would go over a window. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Bizman shekasher v'talui pokakin. The only time you're allowed to put it back in its place is when it's already tied and connected. Being lav ain't pokakin, but if it's not, then you're not allowed. Namely, you cannot extend that ohel to be used over your window. That's a problem with our Mishnah. Just finishing off the Gemara from that Mishnah, the Chachamim were more lenient. And this was a continuation of the Gemara that we learned earlier in the Masechta. This was on Daf Kuf Chav Hey, says the Masor Sashas. Says the Gemara in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Hakol Modim Shein Osin Ohel Arai B'Tchila B'Yom Tov. Everyone agrees that you're not allowed to make an ohel, even a temporary one on Yom Tov, ve'ein tzarich lomar b'Shabbos, all the more so on Shabbos. Lo nechleku, where do they argue? Elo lahosiv, in regards to adding on Shabbos. She Rabbi Eliezer Omer, critical line for us. She Rabbi Eliezer Omer, ein mosifin b'Yom Tov ve'ein tzarich lomar b'Shabbos. You're not allowed to be mosif on an ohel. All that is based on the Gemara about Pekaka Chalon, about this awning that we put over the window. V'chachamim Omer, mosifin b'Shabbos ve'ein tzarich lomar b'Yom Tov. So therefore, we have a contradiction between two sheets of Rabbi Eliezer. In our Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer was of the opinion that it's mutter to put up the basket, it's mutter to put up the sieve. Yet we see from the Mishnah on Kuf Chav Hey that he doesn't allow the extension of an awning, which is also an ohel arai. So we have a contradiction. Our Mishnah says ohel arai is mutter in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, and on Kuf Chav Hey it says ohel arai is not mutter in the same name of the same person. Answers the Gemara, a good question, and we're going to embrace your question, but there's a reason why it is the way that it is. Rabbi Eliezer, Savar La, Rabbi Huda. Because Rabbi Eliezer holds within the shita of another Tana. The Tanya, the Brisa writes 5 lines from the bottom. Ein bein Shabbos liyom tov ela ochel nefesh bilvad. A famous Mishnah in Maseches Megillah. What? What did I say? Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. I reversed them. Sorry. Ein bein Yom Tov l'Shabbos ela ochel nefesh bilvad. That there's no difference between Yom Tov and Shabbos except for the malachos ochel nefesh, the ones allowed to cook, and some other malachos, machlokes rishonim, what's included in the heter there. Nevertheless, the next part of that brisa reads, Rabbi Yehuda matir af machshirei ochel nefesh. So what is the Gemara answering here? That you're right. Really, Rabbi Eliezer be'etzem holds that a hosafa be'ohel arai is aser, that you're not allowed to take an oil and extend it. In our Mishnah, it should also be aser. But the only reason why in our Mishnah it's mutter is because it's machshirei ochel nefesh. And think about what we learned in our previous parak, in parak Rabbi Eliezer Demila. Remember the first Mishnah we learned there? The Rabbi Eliezer said you can do every machshir Demila. Look what he's saying in our Mishnah. Afalpi, that he holds that really the hosaf of an oil arai, that extending an oil arai is aser, but here it's mutter because it's machshirim. So that's Rabbi Eliezer the Shitaso, who seems to extend the idea of preparing for something on Shabbos. You're still allowed to do it. It's a machshir, so therefore you're allowed to do it because it's machshir ochel nefesh, so it's mutter on yontif. So asks the Gemara, well, maybe Amar deshamina le Rabbi Yehuda. When would Rabbi Yehuda say that b'machshirin, that you're allowed to do this activity on Shabbos that should otherwise be aser, but it's allowed because of ochel nefesh? That's only true. She'efshar la'asos me'erev yom tov. That's only true when the food would taste better by cooking it on yontif. But here you could have put up the netting before Shabbos. You could have put up the seed before Shabbos. But the machshir she'efshar la'asos me'erev yom tov mishamas le Rabbi Yehuda, you would say that that's melechas ochel nefesh, that's machshirin, but you could have put it up before Shabbos. Again, it's not like cooking food that would have tasted better had you cooked it day of. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about hanging up something that functions as an ohel that you could have done the day before Yontif. I'm not being matir that. The answer is the Gemara. You're right. That is shitas Rabbi Yehuda. However, to Rabbi Eliezer, adifa mid Rabbi Yehuda. Wow, Rabbi Eliezer takes it even further. And therefore, this is Rabbi Eliezer the shita. So the Gemara concludes that Rabbi Eliezer is of the opinion that one is in fact allowed to create this ohel arai on Yontif itself, even though you could have done it before Yontif and you didn't. Rabbi Yehuda is one step below that you are allowed to do machshirei ochel nefesh, but only if you couldn't have done it before Yontif. And then the most machmir shita in our Mishnah is the Chachamim, who said ein tolim. Now, speaking of the Chachamim, our Mishnah says that ein tolim, as a mishmeres b'yom tov, the Chachamim don't allow it. So the Gemara says 2 lines from the bottom, ibaya lahu talamai. What happened if you actually did extend the netting? What isser have you violated? Because the Chachamim said it's us. Rabbi Eliezer says it's mutter all the way, no problem at all. Even if you could have done it before Yontif and you didn't, it's mutter because Rabbi Eliezer the Shitaso from the previous parak, Rabbi Eliezer to here, he allows us to do activities on Shabbos, even if it could have been done on Yontif, even if it could have been done before, by Bris Milah, by Shabbos, here by Yontif. So what would have been the din according to the Chachamim who don't allow putting up the netting? Amar Rav Yosef Tala, if in fact you hang that netting, chayiv chatas. Wow, an isser d'oraisa. So says the Gemara, Amar le'abaye, last line of Kuf Lamed Zayin and Beis, Amar le'abaye, elamayata, if that's true, really? It's an isser d'oraisa to hang up a net? Tala kuza b'sichta, hachanami d'machayv, if you hang up a basket on a nail, you're going to be chayiv midoraisa? It's very strange. Amar Abaye, turning to the top of Daf Kuf Lamed Ches Med Aleph, what does he hold? It must be that he holds Amar Abaye midirabanan. Really, our Mishnah is saying that it's midirabanan. The Chachamim are not saying that there's a din d'oraisa to put up the netting, just that it's a din d'rabanan. Shelo yaseh kederach shu oseh b'chol, because we should make sure that we don't do activities that look like the weekday. A very important Rashi, a language that we will see throughout the poskim, throughout Maseches Shabbos. Rashi here writes, Ka'asrei lachachamim, the Chachamim forbade it, Demasnisin delo shavkinan le, lemisle lemevad uvda dechol. The language of uvda dechol or uvdin dechol is a language we see all the time. Are you allowed to use certain types of cutting tools? Let's say you have one of those cheese cutters. Are you allowed to use that on Shabbos to cut cheese? There's no issue of cutting cheese. But maybe the kli is an uvdin dechol type of kli. Maybe you should rather cut it with a knife, just an example. But this is where we see the language of uvdin dechol, that according to the Chachamim, based on Abaye and the Gemara arguing against Rabbi Yosef said it's chiyuv chatas. Abaye says it's not a chiyuv chatas, relax. It's an isser d'rabbanan of uvdin dechol. This is not the kind of thing you should be doing on Shabbos, and therefore you should not do it. So says the Gemara, man kit Abaye chumre masnisa v'tani. He collected a bunch of halachos and put them all together in one little unit. Hagod v'hamishmeres kila, the kisei galin. Hagod, Rashi, just to the right, Dibra Maskal Hagod, who or shall behema tafur. It is the leather of an animal that is stitched. Upiv rachav me'od, has a very wide opening. The yeshlo shenatzim, it has drawstrings. The ovre drachem memalin also yain ochalav, and people who were travelers, they would use it. They'd fill it up with their liquid. The makom shetoken sham ohalehem, where their tents would be there to rest. Lalun. The shotchen also upiv matuach al gabe yasedus v'haruach overes mitachtav umitzdanin shelo yiskalkel hayayin Rabbi dome la'oel la'achar shenimta. So this was type of a cooling system. It was a place where it was breezy. They would stretch out this type of leather and kind of like a hammock type of shape, but leather's waterproof. And they would pour in their water or pour in their milk or pour in the wine so that it can get cooled off, because now just from traveling against their bodies, it would be very hot. That's the case of god. Back in the Gemara, third line, god, that's that leather thing that we'd stretch between trees, stretch anywhere actually. Mishmeres kila. Mishmeres is our case, and a kila, the mishmeres is our case of the netting. The kila is a canopy bed. The kisei galin. Kisei galin is a certain type of chair that would be, that was basically made to break apart and rebuild again. We sometimes see these chairs nowadays, they're foldable, right? You have a beach chair, you can fold it up. This was different in that the pieces actually came off, the legs came off, so that would be its own animal. In all of those cases, lo yase, you should not do that, fourth line. But if you did it, you would then violate an Isser D'Rabbanan. What about ohale keva lo yase, making a permanent tent? Let's say you wanted to build your sukkah on Shabbos in the middle of July. It's an ohal keva, it's going to be up for a while. So says the Gemara, that's lo yasa v'im asa chayav chatas. That's a Mr. Doraisa. That you're not allowed to do. Pasha, you're not allowed to do that. Aval, however, mita, the kisei, traskal, the asla, mutter lintosan lechatchila. What about a bed? If you stand up a bed on Shabbos, isn't it a tent if you were to be underneath it? I mean, you've made an ohel of some kind. What about a kisei, a chair? There's space underneath. What about a traskal, a basket? I guess in theory you could walk underneath the basket. Most people don't. The asla, a toilet bowl. The toilet bowl is not like we're used to, but ones that they may have had where they would kind of, I guess in theory it's like ours, but in theirs they were like just dropping into the ground. There was just like a large opening. So they'd make this kind of bench that you could sit on. In theory, that's also an ohel. So it says the Gemara, mutter lintosan lechatchila. Those are perfectly fine to use because you're not making those to be an ohel. You don't stand up a folding table on Shabbos to go under the folding table. That's not what a folding table is for. Ladina, let's say that a child, an old enough child, a little kid, no not really, but let's say there's a 14-year-old, a 15-year-old, and you open up a table for the sake of making a canopy, that could be an Isser D'Rabbanan. Why? Because now you're using it as an ohel. You're climbing under the table in order to live there for a few minutes, to play with whatever. So that might really be problematic. That might be an Isser D'Rabbanan of asiyas ohel. Ohel arai. So we should be careful. But in general, let's say that you forgot to set up a table before Shabbos and you have company, whatever the case. So then you're allowed to set up a table. That's totally mutter. You just can't set it up to sit underneath it.
What if the kids are playing fort they build, right? They tables build the whole thing, take tables, chairs, whatever they use, because they're busy taking your Shabbos nap.
Yeah.
All the kids come and say, "Hey, Dad, play with me." And you go and climb underneath.
You can climb underneath it.
You just can't build it.
Can't build it. Yeah, see, it's making the ohel. So we'll see today what the parameters. So they should be doing that. Let a little kid do that. Let a little kids. It could be an Isser D'Rabbanan. I mean, little kid. Right. Not even an 11-year-old. They're already like age of chinuch. But you're talking about a 6-year-old. That's fine. And we're also going to see some parameters now about how we define what the top has to look like. How narrow does the top have to be to not be an ohel? We'll see. There's some beds that were made that way. Instead of a canopy bed that's four-cornered, just imagine that there's one bar and you just drape it. It looks like a teepee. Is that called an ohel? We'll see in the Gemara today. Right. There are parameters about this, but it's taka true. Well, yeah. Well, whatever material it was, up to that. Yeah. So we'll have to see. What do you mean? So that the example that I just gave, where you're throwing it over one bar, is mutter. That's not an ohel. But we'll see that if it's wider than that, then that's really a problem. It could be a problem, I should say. Maybe there's other ways to do it. I don't know. You got to get creative. You have to ask Rabbi Robinson. I'm not positing, but that's what the Gemara does seem that way, that it could be problematic. So then says the Gemara, what's that?
Longer nap.
Take a longer nap. Yeah, that's always the solution. Maybe not for Shalom Bayis, but certainly for Hilchos Shabbos. So. Okay, so let's continue. So the Gemara says, we're at the 2 dots now. Ve'ein noslim latzulia b'Shabbos. The Chachamim, if you look back in our Mishnah, the Chachamim said that you're not allowed to put anything into that filter on Shabbos. What if you did? You poured wine in, and now there's the parts of the grapes that have stayed in there. Amar of Kahana, Shimer Chayav Chatas. That's an Isser Doraisa. So that means that in our Mishnah, we have Rabbi Eliezer who says mutter, and we have the Chachamim who say Chayav. So asks the Gemara a great question. Maskifla Rav Sheshes mi'ika midi. Is there such a scenario? The Rabbanan mechai vechatas Rabbi Eliezer shar lechatchila. Could we have a machlokas in the Tanaim where one shita says you are chayav a korban, you're chayav a chatas, you're chayav skilu v'dei shemayim, and at the same time that that's true, you have someone that Rabbi Eliezer shar lechatchila, that one is mutter. That's the machlokas we have in our Mishnah. According to the way the Gemara just answered, the two shitas in our Mishnah are completely 180 degrees apart. One says totally mutter, and one says chayv chatas. It says the Gemara, maskifla Rabbi Yosef alamalo. Why do we not have that? Of course that exists. Of course we have scenarios like that. Harei ir shel zahav. We learned about this many blot ago. A case of a piece of jewelry that a woman used to wear, the ir shel zahav. It had Yerushalayim, according to some Rishonim that we learned then. Some Rishonim held that it was kind of like etched into this plate that a woman would wear as a piece of jewelry. Here were the shitas. There are Meir Mechayev Chatas, Rabbi Eliezer Shar Lechatchila. We see there that there were two shitas that were equally extreme. Maihi, what's the Mari Makom? 1/3 of the way down, Kuf Lamed Ches Med Aleph, says the Gemara. Tanya, the Brisa writes, this was almost 100 blot ago. This is, well, not really, it's like 60, 70 blot ago. And there the Gemara says, Lo Seitze Isha Be'ir Shel Zav, she should not wear this piece of jewelry. Bim Yatza Chayv Chatas Tivir of Meir. There we see all the way to the right, we see one very far extreme, that there's an Isser Doraisa for a woman to wear this garment out of the house on Shabbos and Rosh Hashanah. Next shita, so he's only one level down, but let's look at the third shita. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Yota Isha Be'ir Shel Zav Lechatchila. What do we see in this brisa? We see the 180 degrees. We see that the Tanakama, Rabbi Meir, held it was a chiyuv chatas, and we see that Rabbi Eliezer is of the opinion that it's mutter lechatchila. So we have a precedent. You wanted to ask me and say that there's no way that the Chachamim in our Mishnah hold that putting something in the filter on Shabbos is an Isser Doraisa because mi'ika midi. Is there such a thing? Is there such a scenario where one shita holds a chiyuv chatas and one shita holds mutter? The Gemara says, yes, we have that. We had it around Daf Nun Tes. We have a precedent for that. So what's the problem? So Amar Le Abaye, no, that's not a good answer. Look in that brisa. How many shitas were there? 3. Chiyuv chatas, Isser Derabanan, and mutter. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Eliezer ad Rabbi Meir koy. Rabbi Eliezer, when he said mutter lechatchila, he wasn't arguing on the sheet of Rabbi Meir that said chayv chatas. He was arguing on the middle shita. No, ad Rabbanan koy. He was arguing on the sheet of the Rabbanan who said that it was pater avalasser. And there he said v'amar lahu, and he said to them v'amar lahu ihu, and to them he said, namely, Rabbi Eliezer said to the Chachamim, who said it was an Isser D'Rabbanan mutter lechatchila, I don't agree with you. So no, we don't have the precedent that you're looking for, where there's a bar pluktas, there's two people arguing. One person holds it's a chiyuv chatas, and one person holds that it's a mutter. We just don't have that. We don't have the precedent. So then that's how the Gemara ends up. And if that's true, so then we don't have such an extreme. If that's true, then we may need to reconsider the sheet of the Rabbanan. Is it really a chiyuv chatas, yes or no? The Gemara seems to imply that it can't be because there is no precedent. That's what the Gemara's implication is, which means we'd have to go back and re-understand our Mishnah. Halfway down, let's say that a person was about to pour a wine with some sediment in the wine into one of these filters. What hasra would you give? As we know, in order to be mechayev someone skila b'dei bezdin, there's a process. You shouldn't try to do this, but if in fact you are a witness, then you would say to the person, no, don't do this on Shabbos. You're going to violate the Isser of whatever that is. So what warning would you give to someone as they are about to pour wine with grape skins in it? What Isser might they do? That's the Gemara's question. What hasra would you give? Rabba Omar Mishum Borer. Rabba says classical Borer. Reb Zera Omar Mishum Meraked. Now Meraked is similar to Borer. But Amar Rabba says, Kavasi Didi Mistabra. My opinion that Borer is the hasra that you give, namely that's the Isser that you're doing. I'm really right, because Madarko Shel Borer Notel Ochel Umaniach Hapsoles, that the good stuff flows through and we leave over the bad stuff. Avachanami Notel Esa Ochel Umaniach Hapsoles. We're going to take the wine and leave all the sediment, all the skins inside the sieve. So that's perfect. That's classical Borer. Amar Reb Zera, I disagree with you. Kavasi Didi Mistabra. My shita makes more sense than yours, because Madarko Shel Meraked Psoles Milamala Ve'ochel Milamata. Just like by Meraked, where does the psolas rest when it's done? Above. But when you use a filter, you're pouring through water. Now, when you're using noodles, you pour the water through. The water is what we don't want. But here, when you're pouring wine through, we want the liquid that comes through to leave the sediment in the seed. So that's what Reb Zeir is arguing, is that the model of Meraked is that psolas is always at the top after you're done with the filtering.
It's similar to your little coffee thing, right? We're pouring water and the coffee grains stay out, but the good coffee comes down.
So that would be this. This requires research, because the difference between borer and meraked is very, very subtle here. Like if you look at the differences, at the end of the day, you're separating good from bad. You want to call it meraked because the psolas is above. You want to call it borer because the good is at the bottom. It's two sides of the same coin. So the Rishonim here do have you're raising a good point. The Rishonim here do have a hard time. But yes, coffee would be that question. It's a good question as to whether or not that is borer, is it not borer? It's a good question. Yeah, but a lot of poskim are matir in that case. Sometimes with coffee, you have bigger shilas about the bishul component. How is it cooked already? It's freeze dried, means it's baked, right? It was never interacting with liquid. So a lot of poskim are lenient, some are not. Ask your local Orthodox rabbi. So that's how they just have a machlokas here about which malacha you would say to the person, wait, don't do the isser of either borer or meraked. And I would just add another layer. If I say meraked according to the first sheet of borer, is it still chayav? Like how nuanced do you have to be? Hainu borer, hainu zora, hainu meraked. That was a havamim the Gemara asked many blot ago. These three malachos are nearly identical. So not simple to decipher this, but nevertheless, these are the two shitas of Rabbi and Reb Zeir. We're right now at the word tani, about 15 lines from the bottom. Tani, Rami Bar Yechezkel taught as follows. Talis kefula lo yaase v'imasa pater avalaser. If you take a talis kefula, we're going to look at Rashi in a second. You should not, but if you do, it's an isser derabbanan. Take a look at Rashi. Dibra maskel talis. 5 lines before the Rashis get wider again. Talis kefula lo yaase. Lishtoach taliso, to spread out a talis al gabe arba yesedos over 4 poles. Lishon tachteha, to sleep under it. V'roshen miskaplan lekanu lekan, and basically they fall down on the sides. L'tzad haaretz. V'havi leilik salim lahagein min hachama. And when you drape it over the 4 poles, you basically concealed yourself inside with the talis, with the blanket resting over the 4 poles. It's not lying on a table, it's lying over 4 poles. So is that mutter or not? So it says the Gemara, that's an isser derabbanan. But if you, let's find the spot again here. However, if it was already tied in place and all you're doing is lowering it in place, then then that is permissible. Sometimes people have these types of awnings on their roof that are retractable. So that's already attached. Sometimes people have on their strollers awnings. You can open those awnings. You have a rain awning on a stroller. As long as it's on the stroller before Shabbos, then it's mutter to extend. You can't put it on the stroller on Shabbos. That's making an ohel arai. But once it's already on, then that's permissible. That's this din right here. Is that once it's already in place, it's chut or mashicha, it already exists in place, then there's no isur derabbanan of ohel arai. That's mutter l'tosa lechatchila, says the Gemara. So b'minei Rav Kahana mi Rav. This Gemara is very confusing, and don't worry, we're going to get to the answer quickly. But these questions flip-flop very quickly. Says the Gemara, Kila mai. We learned about a canopy. What's the din? Mahu. What's the din? Amarle af mita asura. Even a bed is asur. So we asked about a kila, and we said even a bed is asur, implying kila and bed is asur. And then he asked another question, mita mahu. What about a bed? And he reversed it. Amarle af kila muteres. They're both mutter. So shita number 1 is both kila and mita are asur. Shita number 2 is both kila and mita are mutter. Kila umita mahu. What about both of them? Amarle, a mixed answer. Kila asura mita muteres. It depends. The kila, the canopy is not allowed, and the bed is allowed. Below kasha. These 3 answers are all answerable. How does it work out? Hadika amar af mita asura. According to the shita, that both the kila and the mita are asura. That's kiddik karmenoi. That's like these people, take a look at Rashi, Dibur Hamaschil Kiddik Karmenoi, 6 lines from the bottom, Hainu Gilal Nisa, Sheporko Machzira V'Hushem Makum, you take it apart, it's just the name of the city, but they used to take apart the bed, Lashon Acher, in other languages, Karmenoi, Mochre Bigde Pishtan, Mochrin Alei, and they're just the fabric that was sold on top of them. But the way that those beds were put together and taken apart, that was usher, that's not allowed. And what about the other Shita? Hadika Amarle Af Kila Muteres. When do we say that both the bed and the canopy are mutter? That's Kid Rami Bar Yechezkel. That's how when we started our brisa about 6 lines ago, he said that if it's already in place, if it's already tied down, so then it's permissible for one to then for one to then do that because it's already in place. There's no Isser D'Rabbanan of Ohel Arai if it's already tied down. And the third case, Kila Asura Mitu Muteres, that is Kiddidan. What does that mean? Kiddidan, like we said. What did we say? Take a look at Rashi, Dibra Masal Kiddidan. We're talking about Mita Shahaisa Zekufa, who Moshiva al Ragleha. It's like what do they call the Murphy beds, the ones that go into the walls? Is that what they're called? So something along those lines. You could stand it up and you can put it down. So that's not problematic, seemingly. The mita is not problematic, but a canopy that would be retractable seemingly would be problematic according to this Gemara. But again, it's a little hard to understand this because the Kiddidan means mita. It's really only talking about the bed. That's what Rashi says. Rashi, 4 lines from the bottom, Kiddidan means mita shaisa zekufa was standing up straight, uhu moshiv al ragla, and then you put it back down on its legs.
Is that going to be a problem of like if you had a sofa bed or what you call the couch has a bed inside?
Sure. So that's what the Gemara Taka says is mutter. That is mutter. Umita muteres kiddidan.
Why would bed off the wall be any different?
No, this is that.
And they're saying it's not.
Well, actually, the language of the Gemara is the language of Rashi is not like what you're like. The language of Rashi is like if you took this table and literally stood it up, right, 4 legs out, let's say with the bed. That's what Rashi says is mutter, because Rashi's language here on the 4th line is mita shaisa zekufa, standing up straight, and then himoshiva al ragla, then you lie it down again. That's what Rashi's talking about. The sofa bed should be mutter for. It's even less problematic than that.
It's already formed.
Yeah, it's already, you're just literally unfolding it. It's more similar to the awning that's already in place than this case.
The bed will also be probably set up already.
Correct. That would, at the least, it would be this din, which is anyways mutter.
Right.
But if it's attached to the wall, it's a suya lakach, it's made that way, for sure. Okay. Next case, says the Gemara, 5 lines from the bottom. Amar Rav Yosef chazino luhu lekile debe Rav Huna deme orta negidu umitzafra chavita ramya. He said, I actually saw a case where there was a canopy of some kind in the house of Rav Huna, Deme Orta Nagidu. At night it was spread out. It was laid out to sleep on Mitzafra Chavita Ramya. And it was, let's take a look at Rashi. Deme Orta Nagidu Mitzafra Chavita. Rashi says, Belele Shabbos, Ra'isim Perusos. I saw at night that they were spread out. Ulaboke Ra'isim Ushlachim La'aretz. And they were put on the floor. Alma Mutter Leporka. You're allowed to take that bed apart. V'achanami Mutter Lintosa. And therefore you're allowed to put that bed together again. So just a practical, hands-on story. What about covering your windows? Amar Rav Mishum Rabbi Chia, vilon, a vilona. We have to make sure we get the language right. What's a vilon here? Rashi says, second to the last lines, masach shekeneged hapesach. It's a screen that covers a door. Maybe sometimes people would use these magnetic screens to keep bugs out. Maybe they didn't have the magnetic, maybe they had magnets, but not the way that we do. So that maybe there's something to cover the door is vilon, mutter lintosa mutter leporko, that's permissible. Amar Shmuel Mishum Rabbi Chia, turning to the top of Daf Kuflam and Tesmet Beis Kilas Chasanim, if you have the bed of a chasan, that's mutter lintosa mutter leporko, that is permissible for one to do that. Look at the second line of Rashi, within Dibra Masal Kilas Chasanim, Rashi says, Yesh la gag, dehabe ohel, start from the word v'shel chasanim. Second line toward the end. V'shel chasanim al gabe naklitin she'enam ela shnayim be'emtzayo samita. You had 1 bar that ran across the top. So, ledugma, if you were to use a chair like this and you drape something over the chair, so there's only 1 bar across the middle. That's not making like a square rectangle shape. That's literally making a teepee. So that's how Rashi understands. That's what the kilas chasanim is. That's mutter lintosa mutter leporka. And it's important to understand this because of the next few lines. Amar Rav Sheshes Bered Ravidi Lo Amran. When do we say that this kilas chasanim, that this teepee-looking canopy bed is permissible? Lo Amran ela she'ein begaga tefach. That's only true if at the bar at the top the width is not 1 tefach. Why? Let's say the width of the bar was a tefach, so then that's going to be problematic. Ela yesh begaga tefach asura. Then that would be an Isser D'Rabbanan to do. So if you have 1 pole running across the top of your bed and you want to drape a canopy over it, there may be halachic reasons for this. For a couple to be mashamish mitasim in front of Sifrei Kodesh, there are halachos like this, that would be permissible. But if the width of that bar is a tefach or more, which is 3 to 4 inches, whatever it is, then it's Asr. And when is it, what are the parameters of saying that the roof of the teepeed canopy can only be a tefach? That's true that within the first 3 inches of the fall of the canopy, right? So you have a teepee like this. So let's say that the end of my fingers was 3 tefachim. So what's the width at the 3 tefach distance down? When you drop 3, then you look at the distance. There, that's a chumrah, because it means that it's not just at the peak, it has to be at a very tight slope. The art scroll actually has a couple of pictures about this. As you can see, the tighter slope of that picture is to indicate that it's only mutter when you put the canopy up, that if 3 tefachim down into the canopy, it's still less than a tefach in width. That's when it's permissible. That's this line here. But if having dropped 3 inches from the top of the canopy, and now it is in fact a tefach wide, then that's aser. We skip the next 3 lines according to some of the Meforshim. Below Amran, first words on the line. Below Amran, ela delo nachis mipuria tefach. Aval nachis mipuria tefach aser. If it's going to be draping down and covering the sides of your bed in a way where it's providing some type of protection, so that's going to be problematic as well. So basically, this canopy is only mutter for kilas chasanim under the most narrow of circumstances. B'amar of Sheshes, let's talk about hats for a minute. B'amar of Sheshes, Braid Rav Idi. Hi siana shari. This is some type of wide-brimmed hat. It's permissible to wear. How can that be? Itmar siana aser machlokas. We have 2 sources in the Amoraim that don't seem to agree with each other. Answers the Gemara, lo kasha. It depends how wide the brim is. If the brim you're putting on is a tefach, 3 to 4 inches, it's problematic. Let's pause for a second. Let's say that I wanted to put on a baseball hat because it's raining. That, according to this Gemara, would be aser. Not allowed to do that because you're adding a hat that is a tefach. That's a siana. That's a hat that has a tefach width, and you're using it to protect you. That is an ohel arai. That's not allowed according to the Havim in the Gemara. So ask the Gemara, Elamayata, if that's true, sharviv bigulima tefach hachanami demechaye. Let's say that you're wrapping your head in a scarf, and the scarf extends off of your face a tefach. You're going to tell me that's an ohel? You've got a wrap around your head. How could you tell me that that's ohel? That's crazy. Says the Gemara, Ella, this is a huge machlokes here, and the nafkaminas are very practical for us. Does the word Ella exist in this Gemara? If the word Ella exists in the Gemara, and this is how Rashi understands, then we're pivoting away from answer number 1 about tefach and less than a tefach to a whole different answer of lo kasha had mehadek had lo mehadek, of just how tightly the hat is worn. If the hat is not worn tightly, we're afraid it's going to blow off and you'll carry on Shabbos. Totally unrelated to the world of ohel. Masha'inkin, according to the Bali Tosfos, if the word Ella is in the Gemara, we're not pivoting away. We're adding a qualification that not only does it have to be that it's a tefach, but it has to be loose. So that's already a whole different discussion that the nafkamina would be wearing a baseball hat on Shabbos. And I have seen, this was a long time ago, 12, 13 years ago, and I was in a base medrash and people were learning this sugya, and there were some people who were talking in terms of really mamish can't wear a hat on Shabbos, a rain hat that has a brim that's a tefach. If you're wearing it because of the rain, some poskim apparently hold. I don't know how we pass from the Dina. I'm the opposite. I take off my Shabbos hat because I want to ruin my hat, but I don't have a rain hat. So let's say someone does have a rain hat. Is that mutter to wear on Shabbos? That depends on how Rashi and Tosfos learn the Gemara. According to Rashi, it would be mutter. According to Tosfos, it's very problematic if the brim is actually a tefach. Now, a tefach of a brim is not insignificant. It's, I guess your average Shabbos hat. I don't know, approximately a tefach. So these are shilas that need to be discussed because they're very practical. 1/3 of the way down, Kuf Lamed Ches Amud Beis. Shalach le Rami Bar Yecheskel Rav Huna. Rami Bar Yecheskel sent a letter to Rav Huna. Aim alon easy. I just looked up this word. I wasn't familiar with it. Easy means friend. I don't know what the etymology is. My friend, give me some Torah. Hanach mili ma'al yasa. These beautiful words. The Amr Slam Mishmei de Rab that you learned in the name of Rab. Tarte b'Shabbos v'chad b'Torah. Teach me 2 things that have to do with the laws of Shabbos, and 1 thing that has to do with the world of Torah. So he sent him back a letter. Shalach le hadatanya godi b'kisna mutzah v'tosa b'Shabbos. There's certain types of these leathers that you're allowed to stretch on Shabbos. When is that allowed? Amar Rav, what's the beautiful Torah that Rav taught us about Hilchos Shabbos? What did Rav say? Lo shanim ela b'beis b'nei adam. It's only mutzah when there's 2 people. About the adam echad. Aser, when there's 1 person hanging it up, he's gonna stretching out the leather. He's more likely to stretch it out, and that's not allowed. Only 2 people are allowed. Amar Abaye, the kila, the canopy. Afilu beis b'nei adam aser. Even 2 biyud. Excuse me. Afilu biyud b'nei adam. Even 10 people are not allowed. Yefshar delo mimtecha porta, because the fabric is so soft. So we're afraid that there's basically no way that a person's not going to stretch it out. Idach maihi, what's the other Torah that you were going to teach me about Shabbos? The Tanya, the Brisa writes, remember the Torah from Rav, so we're going to have a Brisa, and then it's going to be followed by Rav, because the request was to get 2 pieces of Torah from Shabbos by Rav and 1 by Torah. So let's see. Titania Kira Shenishmata Achas Miyarkosea, an oven where one of the legs fell off. Mutter the taltal, it's permissible to move. Shtayim Asr, when there's two legs missing, it's Asr. Rav Amar, and this is the beautiful Torah that is sharing. Afilu Chad Nami Asr Gzera Shem Yitzka. We're afraid that you may put it back in a permanent fashion. So we observe the Rabbanan that you're not allowed to be metaltal even one of the legs because we're concerned that you may end up really affixing it in a permanent way. What was the Torah that he taught? Torah, last of the short lines, last sugya of the evening. Torah, the Amar Rav says, Asida, Torah shetishtachach mi-Yisrael. We are afraid, or not, we're afraid, Asida. It is in the future going to happen that Torah will be forgotten from the Jewish people. Now this is depressing because Rav is a Talmud of Rabbi, and they had already broken the rules to write down the Torah Shebaal Peh. So you have to realize this is like very ominous. The timing is not good for Rav to be saying this. His Rebbe Mamish just finished writing down Torah Shebaal Peh because we were forgetting it. And then he's like, and in the future it's going to be worse. And that may be many generations since, where we who are educated in Torah, we barely know anything. Like the Talmud Chacham of today, they're few and far between. People who are really holding in Shas and Poskim, like we say in the Pasuk in Shema, that it has to be in the Chudad and Beficha. People ask you a Shaila, you have to have a Psak, you have to know the answers. That's the real level. I'm not like that. Most people are not like that. Very few Rabbanim are like that. It's a high level. So maybe Rav was just foreshadowing our generation and many others between then and now. So that's what he said. The Amar Rav, Asida Torah shetishtachach mi-Yisrael, shene'amar. The pasuk says, "V'hifla Hashem es makosecha." Hafla zu, this wonderment, this suffering is how it's translated. Eini yodea mahu. I don't know what it was. But then Kshu Omer, when the pasuk says, "L'chein hineni yosif lahafli asa'ama zeh hafli b'fela," Havi Omer hafla zo Torah. This challenge is going to be with Torah. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught us 3 lines into the wide lines. When the Rabbanim left Yerushalayim after the Churban and they went to Yavne, Amru Asida Torah shetishtachach mi-Yisrael. They too said that the Torah is going to be forgotten. Shneimar, Hinei yamim va'im ne'um Hashem Elokim v'hishlachti Rav ba'aretz lo Rav l'lechem v'lo tzama l'mayim ki l'shma divrei Hashem. Uchsiv in the pasuk also it's v'na'u mayim ad yam u'mitzafon v'ad mizrach yishotet levakesh es dvar Hashem v'lo yimatzu. You're going to be searching for the words of Hashem, you won't be able to find it. And a triple drasha, dvar Hashem, what will we not know? What words of Hashem will we not know? Zo halacha, dvar Hashem, another drasha, zakate, ket hayamin, dvar Hashem, zo nevuah, we will not be able to have nevuah anymore. Uma yishotet levakesh es dvar Hashem. What does it mean that you're going to be searching for the Torah and you can't find it? Amar Asida, in the future, it's going to be the case. Isha shetito kikar shel truma. A woman is going to take a loaf of bread that is truma. She's going to go ask all the Rabbanim and all the local shuls. She'll walk up and down, knocking on the doors. Rabbi, how do you paskin on this kikar shel truma? Leida im tmeya hivim tori. Maybe no one's going to know what's going on. We're not going to know how to paskin a tumah v'tara. That's probably a wonderful description of our generation. Im tahora hivim tmeya. Really? That's what the Rav's not going to know? Behedjuk sivbe. That's mamash a pasuk in the Torah. The pasuk says, Mikol ha'ochel asher ye'achel. So that can't be it. It can't be about whether or not it's tamei or tahor. Ella leida, maybe the nuance that this generation won't know is im rishona hi v'im shniyahi, whether or not it's a rishon l'tuma or a sheni l'tuma. Maybe they won't know that either. But hanam, you must nizni. That's a Mishnah to distinguish between a rishon l'tuma and a sheni l'tuma. That's a Mishnah. What does the Mishnah say? Keditnan, 9 lines from the bottom, 8 lines from the bottom. Keditnan. Hasherat shinim sabatan, or if there is this animal that's inside of an oven. Hapas shebesocha shniya shatanur tchila. The bread that's in there is considered to be a sheni because the tanur is the rishon. It says the Gemara, what is it that we're afraid that this woman won't be able to get an answer for? After all, the 2 cases that you provided, we have answers for. You want to know if it's tamei or tahor, that's a pasuk in the Torah. You want to know if it's a rishon l'tumah or sheni l'tumah, that's a Mishnah. We have the Torah. So what is it that you're concerned about? Answers the Gemara, mistapka lahu, what they may not know is hada amar le Rava bar Abba le Rava, a sugya that was discussed in the 4th century of the Amoraim with Rava. Maybe we would say that the entire cavity of the oven is treated like one whole unit, like it's all full, and then maybe the bread won't be a sheni l'tumah, the bread will be like a rishon l'tumah because the whole inside of the oven is treated like one. Omar le, no. Lo amrinan lechazi hai tenura command demali tuma. We do not say that. Why do we not say that the whole oven is totally full? Tanya, because the Brisa writes differently. Yachol, I might have thought Yehu kol hakevim mitamin ba'avir klicheres, that everything inside is going to be considered tamei by a klicheres. Talmud lomar kol asher b'socho yitma mikol ha'ochel asher yachel. Ochlin mitamin ba'abir kli cheres. They become tummy in the air of a kli cheres. Ve'in kelim mitamin ba'abir kli cheres. Not everything has the same din. So that's what the Gemara says, is maybe we'll have this lack of clarity in regards to the nuance of whether or not we say that an oven is going to be treated as one functional unit, where the oven and the bread would be treated as pas rishona, possibly, or pas shnia. The real musar is that this is called tishtakach Torah Yisrael. That's what the Gemara assumes is to be forgetting Torah, is to not be able to answer those kinds of shilas. So we definitely have our work cut out for us. By the time we finish, a few times around, we'll be a little bit more knowledgeable. But the standard of learning is, it's remarkably high. Every Mishnah Brura, people say all the time, women don't have a chiyuv for Talmud Torah. Yes, they do. They have a chiyuv to know all of the Mishnah Brura, every shach and taz that's halacha l'maisa. We all have those obligations. That's a very high and lofty level. So daf yomi is gishmak, and we should learn it until we finish it many times. We should just also add an halacha seder to make sure that we have a little bit of a clue, or bring in Rabbi Robinson to just sit here and paskin as we move along. So I don't know a lot of the answers, so I'm part of the problem here as well. All right, we'll pick up again tomorrow night with a blot and a half in your session. Kufla on the test and Mem Amid.